The wind carried the sound of the phone across Laura Mitchell's darkened bedroom, its shrill ring slicing through the silence at 2:43 a.m. She fumbled for the receiver, her mind still clouded with sleep. The voice on the other end was professionally detached, a police officer from a small town in Idaho whose name she'd never heard before. The words tumbled out in practice sequence. Robert Mitchell, her ex-husband, dead from a climbing accident on a remote mountain trail. Body recovered yesterday, personal effects being processed. Someone would need to make arrangements. Laura sat motionless long after the call ended, the phone heavy in her hand. Outside her window, the Oregon rain tapped a gentle rhythm against the glass, oblivious to how the world had just shifted. She and Robert had been divorced for nearly 2 years, their marriage crumbling under the weight of his growing silence, the way his eyes would look through her instead of at her after he returned from particularly devastating fires. As the department's most decorated firefighter, Robert had been first through too many doors, had carried too many bodies. Something inside him had broken, and he'd left before it could break her and Tyler too. The soft padding of small feet in the hallway pulled Laura from her thoughts. Tyler, their 8-year-old son, appeared in the doorway, his dinosaur pajamas rumpled from sleep, clutching the stuffed bear Robert had given him for his 6th birthday. "Mom, who called?" His voice was thin and uncertain in the darkness. Laura's throat tightened as she patted the space beside her. "Come here, sweetheart." How do you tell a child his father is never coming back? Especially when in many ways Robert had already disappeared from their lives, his visits and calls becoming increasingly rare over the past year. Tyler crawled onto the bed, his small body radiating warmth as he leaned against her. Laura wrapped her arm around his narrow shoulders. That was a policeman from Idaho. Dad had an accident while climbing a mountain. He didn't make it, Ty. Dad has died. Tyler didn't cry. He simply stared at the rain-streaked window, his face unnervingly still for a child so young. Then without a word, he slipped from her embrace and padded back to his room, closing the door with a soft click that somehow sounded more final than a slam. In the morning light, the reality of their situation pressed in from all sides. Laura sat at the kitchen table surrounded by overdue bills and a laptop open to her email. The message from the school principal glowed accusingly on the screen. Due to budget cuts, her position as a history teacher would be eliminated at the end of the semester. 15 years of service reduced to 3 paragraphs of corporate regret. She picked up her latest notice from their landlord. Rent increasing by 40% next month, take it or leave it. The apartment market in Portland had become impossible for a single mother on a teacher's salary, and now she wouldn't even have that. Tyler sat at the other end of the table, methodically moving cereal around his bowl without eating. Since Robert's departure, he had retreated into himself, rarely speaking more than necessary. The divorce had affected him deeply, but Robert's sporadic visits had at least given him something to hold on to. Now even that was gone. Laura watched as her son abandoned his breakfast and retrieved his sketchpad from the living room. He flipped to a clean page and began drawing with the focused intensity that had become his primary form of communication. Mountains appeared under his careful, hand-jagged peaks, reaching toward an imaginary sky, and perched precariously on a cliff edge, a small structure that could only be a house. "That's beautiful, Ty. Is that from your imagination?" Tyler didn't look up. "Dad told me about it in his stories." Laura leaned closer. The mountain scene was remarkably detailed for a child his age. Specific rock formations, a distinctive waterfall cascading down one side, and that curious little house which appeared in most of Tyler's recent drawings. Robert must have described this place to him during their video calls, moments of connection she hadn't been privy to. The mail slot clattered, breaking the moment. Laura collected the usual stack of bills and advertisements, but among them was a small padded envelope addressed to Tyler in handwriting she recognized immediately. Robert's distinctive script, always slightly slanted, as if constantly in a hurry. The postmark showed it had been mailed 3 days ago before the accident. Tyler noticed it immediately, his eyes widening as he abandoned his drawing and reached for the package. His fingers worked carefully at the seal, treating it as something precious. Inside was a wooden box about the size of a thick paperback book, intricately carved with forest scenes. The lid bore an inscription, "For Tyler when you're ready." Laura felt a pang of something between grief and resentment. Even now, Robert was finding ways to connect with their son while remaining a mystery to her. Tyler opened the box carefully. Inside lay several folded papers, what appeared to be a hand-drawn map and a small brass compass with a crack running across its face. Tyler examined each item with reverent care, unfolding the letters one by one. The first was dated nearly 6 months ago. What does it say, Ty? Tyler held the letter close as if reluctant to share his father's words. It's about a special place. Dad says he built a house on a mountain where the wind sounds like music. He says someday we might go there together. Laura felt her chest tighten. Robert had built a house where, with what money? In the divorce settlement, he'd claimed financial hardship, leaving her to shoulder most of their shared debt, while he apparently had resources to purchase land and build a structure somewhere in Idaho. Tyler was already unfolding what appeared to be a map hand-drawn on weathered paper. It showed mountains, rivers, and trails marked with strange symbols. At the top was written "The Path Home" in Robert's handwriting. As Tyler examined the map, Laura noticed something unusual on the inside lid of the wooden box. A series of small scratches that formed what looked like numbers. Tyler's fingers traced over them before he reached for his sketchbook, carefully copying them down. "They're coordinates, Mom, like the ones Dad taught me for finding constellations, but these are for finding places on Earth." Laura was taken aback. "When did Dad teach you about GPS coordinates?" Tyler shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "During our video calls. He said it's important to always know where you are." A memory surfaced. Robert hunched over maps during their camping trips early in their marriage, explaining terrain features and navigation techniques with the same passion other men might discuss sports or cars. These were skills from his time in the Air Force before becoming a firefighter, skills he apparently had been passing down to Tyler without her knowledge. The doorbell rang, startling them both. Laura opened it to find a courier holding another package, this one larger and more official looking. "Delivery for Laura Mitchell. Requires signature." After signing, she brought the package to the kitchen table. The sender was Morrison and Associates Attorneys at Law from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Inside was a thick envelope of legal documents and a letter on formal stationery. "Dear Mrs. Mitchell, we represent the estate of Robert James Mitchell. As the mother of his minor son, Tyler Mitchell, you are being notified of certain provisions in Mr. Mitchell's will that require immediate attention." Laura skimmed through the legal jargon, her confusion mounting with each paragraph. According to the documents, Robert had purchased land in the Bitterroot Mountains of Idaho and constructed a residential structure. The property and all assets related to it were left to Tyler with Laura as trustee until he reached adulthood. Enclosed was a set of keys, property deeds, and instructions for accessing the location. "What is it, Mom?" Tyler looked up from the map, eyes suddenly alert. Laura struggled to find the right words. "Your dad, he left you something, a house it seems, in the mountains of Idaho." Tyler's eyes widened, a spark of something, excitement perhaps, or vindication, flashing across his features. "The house from my drawings, it's real." As Laura sorted through the paperwork, a business card fell out. "Frank Winters, retired USFS Ranger." It read with a handwritten note on the back, "Call before you go. Not everyone wants you to find it." The ominous message sent a chill through her, but it was quickly overshadowed by the stark reality of their situation. With no job, an unaffordable apartment, and dwindling savings, what choice did they really have? This unexpected inheritance, however mysterious, might be their last chance at a fresh start. Laura called the number on Frank's card that evening after Tyler went to bed. The man who answered sounded gruff, cautious, asking several pointed questions to verify her identity before agreeing to meet them when they arrived in Idaho. "Robert was worried about you finding the place. Said if anything happened to him, you'd need guidance." Frank's voice crackled over the line. "There's things about what Robert was doing up there that some powerful people don't want getting out." "What things? What was Robert involved in?" A heavy pause. "Not over the phone, just be careful who you talk to about the property, especially if you run into a man named Gregory Coleman. He's been trying to buy up land all through that valley. Wouldn't take kindly to another holdout." The call left Laura with more questions than answers, but also with a growing sense that this journey was inevitable. She spent the night researching the area online, trying to piece together why Robert would have secluded himself in one of the most remote regions of the Northern Rockies. In the morning, she found Tyler already awake, his suitcase packed and sitting by the door. When she asked how he knew they would be leaving, he simply pointed to his father's letter. "When you're ready, follow the map. Some journeys can't wait." 3 days later, they left Portland, behind their meager belongings packed into Laura's aging Honda Civic. The landlord had been surprisingly understanding when she explained the situation, even offering to return her security deposit early to help with travel expenses. The school principal arranged for her to take personal leave for the remainder of her contract, a small kindness that wouldn't solve their financial problems, but at least gave them breathing room. Tyler sat quietly in the back seat, surrounded by his drawings, the wooden box, and his ever-present bear. As the city gave way to the rolling landscapes of eastern Oregon, Laura caught him studying the map intently, his small finger tracing routes and landmarks with surprising confidence. "Do you understand that map, Ty?" He nodded without looking up. "Dad's maps always have secrets. You have to know how to look." The drive took them through small towns that grew increasingly sparse as they approached the Idaho border. By late afternoon on the second day, they were winding through mountain passes that made Laura's stomach lurch with each hairpin turn. The GPS signal faded in and out, leaving them increasingly reliant on paper maps and road signs. As dusk approached, they reached the small town of River's End, the last outpost of civilization before the wilderness claimed the landscape entirely. The main street consisted of a handful of weathered buildings that had seen better decades: a general store, a diner, a gas station, and a bar called The Last Stop, with a handful of pickup trucks parked outside. Laura pulled into the motel at the edge of town, a single-story building with peeling paint and a flickering neon vacancy sign. As she checked in, the elderly woman behind the desk eyed her curiously. "You folks just passing through?" "Actually, we're looking for some property in the mountains. My ex-husband had a place up there." The woman's expression shifted subtly. "Wouldn't be Robert Mitchell's place, would it, up near Hawks Ridge?" Laura's surprise must have shown on her face because the woman nodded knowingly. "Small town. Word gets around when a stranger builds in the backcountry. Robert was quiet, kept to himself, but decent. Paid his bills, helped old man Jenkins fix his roof last fall. Shame what happened to him." Laura's throat tightened. "Did you know him well?" "Well enough to know he was running from something. Nightmares, I reckon. My late husband had the same look after Vietnam. Some fires burn from the inside out." The woman handed over the room key. "If you're heading up there, talk to Mike Henderson at The Last Stop. He helped your husband build that place. Knows the trails better than anyone." The motel room was basic but clean. 2 beds with faded quilts, a bathroom with temperamental plumbing, and a small table by the window. Tyler immediately claimed the bed nearest the door, arranging his father's map and compass on the nightstand as if setting up a shrine. "I'm going to find someone who might help us get to Dad's house," Laura said, tucking her phone into her pocket. "Do you want to come with me or stay here and rest?" Tyler gathered his sketchbook in the wooden box. "I'm coming." The Last Stop bar was surprisingly busy for a weeknight in a town this small. Conversations hushed briefly as Laura and Tyler entered, curious eyes taking their measure before returning to drinks and discussions. The air smelled of beer, cigarettes, and decades of stories told over weathered wooden tables. Laura approached the bartender, a middle-aged woman with efficient movements and observant eyes. "I'm looking for Mike Henderson. I was told he might be here." The woman nodded toward a corner booth where an older man sat alone nursing a glass of amber liquid. "That's Mike. Fair warning. He doesn't much care for strangers these days." Mike Henderson looked to be in his late 60s, with a weathered face that had seen its share of mountain winters and summer suns. His silver hair was pulled back in a short ponytail, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a mouth set in a permanent slight frown. When Laura approached, his sharp blue eyes assessed them quickly. "You're Robert's wife." Not a question, but a statement of fact. "Ex-wife, Laura Mitchell. This is Tyler, our son." Mike's gaze softened slightly when it landed on Tyler. He gestured for them to sit. "Robert said you might come someday. Hoped you would actually, though I had my doubts." Tyler slid into the booth across from Mike, immediately pulling out his sketchbook. He flipped to a drawing of the mountain house and pushed it toward the older man. "Is this Dad's house?" Mike studied the drawing, surprise registering briefly. "Pretty close, kid. How'd you know what it looks like?" "Dad told me stories about the eagle's nest on the cliff below and how the sunset makes the windows look like they're on fire." A small smile touched Mike's lips. "He talked about you all the time, you know. Said you had an eye for details others miss." While Tyler continued showing his drawings to Mike, Laura leaned forward. "What was Robert doing up there, Mr. Henderson? He never told me he was building a house in Idaho, let alone one so remote that it apparently requires special navigation to find." Mike took a slow sip of his drink. "Call me Mike." And what Robert was doing was trying to put himself back together. Some men can't heal in the noise of the everyday world. The firefighting, the nightmares. Mike's expression darkened. The Mason Street fire. 3 children and their mother trapped in the attic. Robert got to them, but the floor gave way as he was carrying the youngest out. He made it. They didn't. Changed something fundamental in him. Laura felt her chest constrict. Robert had never told her the specifics, had withdrawn into silence instead, until the gap between them became too wide to bridge. He couldn't sleep after that, Mike continued. Couldn't close his eyes without seeing their faces. Tried therapy medication, nothing worked. He came out here to disappear, bought the most isolated piece of land he could find. Building the house with his hands, that's what started to bring him back. Said working with wood and stone was the only thing that quieted his mind. A motion near the bar's entrance caught Laura's attention. A tall man in an expensive-looking suit had entered immediately, commanding the room with his presence. He looked out of place among the flannel shirts and worn jeans of the locals, his silver hair perfectly styled, his tanned face speaking of time spent on golf courses rather than mountain trails. Mike's expression hardened. Speaking of complications, Gregory Coleman, real estate developer from Boise, been buying up property all through these mountains, building luxury vacation homes for city folks who want to play mountain man 2 weeks a year. Coleman moved through the room with easy confidence, shaking hands and clapping shoulders like a politician working a crowd. When his gaze found their table, his smile widened, though it didn't reach his eyes. He approached with the smooth gait of someone accustomed to getting what he wants. "Mike, you old hermit, holding court tonight." His voice carried the polished tone of practiced charm. His attention shifted to Laura and Tyler. "Don't believe I've had the pleasure." Before Laura could respond, Mike cut in. "This is Laura Mitchell and her son. They're just passing through." Something flickered in Coleman's eyes. Recognition and something sharper. "Mitchell. Any relation to Robert Mitchell?" Laura hesitated, remembering Frank's warning. "He was my ex-husband." "Ah." Coleman's smile thinned. "Terrible accident. My condolences." The words sounded rehearsed hollow. "If you're here about his property, I'd be happy to discuss options. That land has tremendous development potential, though it's terribly inaccessible. Not really suitable for a woman and child." The condescension in his tone made Laura's spine stiffen. "We're not looking to sell." Coleman pulled a business card from his suit pocket and placed it on the table. "When you see the place, you might reconsider. Remote mountain living isn't for everyone, especially those unprepared for its challenges. I'm offering $40,000 sight unseen. That's generous for unimproved wilderness." Tyler, who had been quietly observing, suddenly spoke up. "It's not wilderness. Dad built a house there, with solar panels and a garden and windows that face the sunrise." Coleman's practiced smile faltered slightly as he regarded the boy. "Is that so? Well, my offer stands. Things have a way of looking different in the harsh light of reality." He nodded to them both before returning to the bar. Mike waited until Coleman was out of earshot. "That man's been after Robert's land for over a year. Kept raising his offers, eventually resorted to threats. Said the property was blocking his plans for some eco-resort nonsense." Laura's unease deepened. "Do you think he had anything to do with Robert's accident?" Mike's expression grew guarded. "Can't prove anything. Robert was an experienced climber, knew those trails better than most. But he also knew something that made him nervous those last few weeks. Started keeping records, taking photographs. Said if anything happened to him, I should make sure they got to the right people." As they spoke, Tyler had moved to the window, his attention caught by something outside. He pressed his face against the glass, breath fogging the pane. "Mom, look." Laura joined him at the window. Across the street, a man was climbing into a black SUV with tinted windows. Even from a distance, she recognized Frank Winters from the photos on his business card. Before she could point him out to Mike, the SUV pulled away, disappearing around the corner. Tyler tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, look at the wall." Laura followed his gaze to a faded photograph hanging near the bar's entrance. It showed a group of men standing proudly in front of a half-built structure on a dramatic cliff edge. In the center stood Robert Younger, and smiling in a way she hadn't seen in years, his arm thrown casually around a younger Mike Henderson. But what caught her attention was the mountain backdrop, the exact formation Tyler had been drawing for months. When they returned to Mike's table, he was studying Robert's map with a furrowed brow. "This isn't the main trail." Robert marked an alternative route, harder to follow but safer from prying eyes. He looked up at Laura, his expression grave. "The house is about 12 miles into the backcountry, last 4 miles owned, accessible by foot or ATV. I can guide you there, but we should leave at dawn. Coleman has eyes everywhere, and I don't trust him not to interfere." That night in the motel room, Laura lay awake, questions churning through her mind. What had Robert been hiding? Why was his remote property so important to a wealthy developer? And most troubling, Was his death truly an accident? Beside her, Tyler slept soundly, the wooden box clutched against his chest. In sleep, his face relaxed from the guarded expression he'd maintained since learning of his father's death, making him look younger and more vulnerable. Laura reached for her phone, checking her bank balance for the third time that day. Their savings would last another month, maybe two, if they were extremely careful. After that, uncertainty loomed. She thought of Coleman's offer. $40,000 would give them breathing room, a chance to reset their lives somewhere new. But something about the man's calculating gaze made her hesitate. She scrolled through old photos of Robert, stopping on one from before the Mason Street fire. His eyes clear, smile, genuine arms wrapped around her and a 4-year-old Tyler at a 4th of July picnic. That was the man she had married before the shadows claimed him. The morning brought clear skies and a biting chill that hinted at the mountain elevation awaiting them. Laura and Tyler met Mike outside the general store where he was loading supplies into an aging Jeep Cherokee. Road gets rough about halfway there. We'll switch to ATVs at my friend's outpost for the next section, then hike the last stretch. Mike handed Tyler a small backpack. Basic survival gear. Your dad insisted every visitor have one, even for day trips. Tyler accepted the pack solemnly, immediately checking its contents with methodical care. Laura noticed how the boy's demeanor had shifted since arriving in town. More focused somehow, both older and more childlike at once, as if proximity to his father's world was awakening something dormant in him. As they loaded their bags into Mike's Jeep, Laura noticed Tyler studying the parked vehicles nearby with unusual intensity. Following his gaze, she spotted a black SUV similar to the one Frank Winters had entered the previous night, parked half-hidden behind the gas station. "What is it, Ty?" Tyler pointed to the ground beside their car. "Someone was here, looking at our stuff." Laura might have dismissed his concern, but there were indeed fresh boot prints in the mud beside where her Honda had been parked, and the driver's door showed smudges that hadn't been there the night before. Mike examined the marks with a frown. "Someone's curious about you. Best get moving." The drive took them steadily upward paved roads, giving way to gravel, then to rutted dirt paths that tested the Jeep's suspension. The landscape transformed around them, dense forests opening occasionally to reveal breathtaking views of jagged peaks and plunging valleys. Tyler sat forward, face pressed to the window, drinking in every detail. As they rounded a particularly sharp bend, he suddenly pointed to a crooked pine growing horizontally from a cliff face. "That's on Dad's map, the hanging tree." Laura checked the map on her lap, finding the distinctive symbol marking this exact location. Beside it, in Robert's handwriting, "First Guardian." Mike nodded approvingly. "Your dad marked the journey with what he called guardians, distinctive landmarks that tell you you're on the right path." The boy's got a good eye. The road narrowed further, forcing Mike to slow the Jeep to a crawl over rocks and exposed roots. After about 3 hours, they reached a small clearing where a weathered cabin stood beside a fast-flowing stream. A hand-painted sign read "Thompson's Outfitters" in fading letters. A lean, sun-darkened man emerged from the cabin at the sound of their approach. "About time you showed up, Henderson. Was beginning to think you'd lost your way." "Laura, Tyler, this is Joe Thompson. He's the last outpost of civilization before Robert's place." Joe's weathered face creased into a smile when he spotted Tyler. "So you're the famous Tyler. Your dad showed me your drawings every time he came through. Said you were going to be a famous artist someday." Tyler ducked his head, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, the first Laura had seen since the news of Robert's death. Joe led them to a storage shed where 2 ATVs waited. "Weather report says there's a storm system moving in tomorrow afternoon. You'll want to be settled at the cabin before then. These mountains don't forgive the unprepared." As Joe and Mike secured their bags to the ATVs, Tyler wandered toward the stream, crouching to examine something in the mud. Laura joined him, finding him studying what appeared to be fresh tire tracks leading away from the water. "Someone else has been here, Mom, recently." Tyler pointed to water still pooling in the deepest treads. Before Laura could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the trees, a gunshot distant but unmistakable. "Just hunters," Mike called, though his expression suggested he wasn't convinced. "Let's get moving. Still got a long way to go." The ATV journey pushed them deeper into wilderness, following a trail so faint that Laura would have missed it without Mike's guidance. Tyler rode behind Mike on one vehicle while Laura followed on the second. The boy's posture was alert, his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings, occasionally pointing out landmarks that matched symbols on Robert's map. After nearly 2 hours, they reached a rocky ridge where the trail disappeared entirely. Mike cut the engines. "End of the line for machines. From here we walk." They shouldered their packs, Mike leading with the confidence of someone who had traveled this path many times. The terrain grew steeper, requiring careful footing over loose rocks and exposed roots. Despite the physical challenge, Tyler showed no signs of tiring, moving with a determination that surprised Laura. As they climbed, the air grew thinner, the wind sharper against their faces. Laura's legs burned with the effort, her city life having poorly prepared her for mountain hiking. Yet each time she considered asking for a rest, she caught sight of Tyler pressing forward with single-minded focus and found her second wind. Mike stopped abruptly at a narrow passage between two towering boulders. "The gateway," he announced. "Robert said once you pass through here, you leave the old world behind." Beyond the passage, the trail descended slightly before curving around a massive outcropping. As they followed this path, Tyler suddenly broke into a run, scrambling ahead despite Laura's call to be careful. When she and Mike caught up, they found the boy standing motionless, staring upward with an expression of wonder. Laura followed his gaze and felt her breath catch. Perched on a natural shelf in the mountainside stood a cabin that seemed to grow from the very rock itself. Built of timber and stone with large windows facing the valley below, it appeared both impossibly precarious and perfectly at home in its dramatic setting. A small garden terrace wrapped around one side and what looked like solar panels gleamed on the angled roof. The afternoon sun bathed the structure in golden light, making the windows blaze like signal fires. "Dad built this," Laura whispered, unable to reconcile the broken man who had left their marriage with the visionary who had created this remarkable sanctuary. Mike nodded. "Every board, every stone. Took him nearly a year. Said he needed to build something that would last after failing to save those who couldn't be saved." The final approach to the cabin required navigating a narrow switchback path cut into the mountainside. As they climbed, Laura noticed how the structure revealed itself from different angles, showing thoughtful design elements. A covered porch positioned to capture the sunset, a small waterfall channeled to provide fresh water, native plants integrated among carefully tended garden beds. When they finally reached the cabin's entrance, Tyler stepped forward confidently and knelt by the door. Rather than a conventional lock, there was a series of small metal dials set into the wooden frame. Tyler studied them for a moment, then began rotating them deliberately. "How do you know the combination?" Laura asked, surprised. "It's the stars, Mom. Dad's favorite constellation, Ursa Major." Tyler arranged the dials to match the pattern of the Big Dipper. With a soft click, the mechanism released. The door swung open to reveal a space that took Laura's breath away. The cabin's interior was simple but beautiful. Open concept with handcrafted furniture, exposed beams, and windows positioned to frame spectacular views from every angle. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, while the opposite featured floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes on wilderness survival, botany, architecture, and psychology. Tyler moved through the space with quiet reverence, touching objects gently as if greeting old friends. He went directly to a small desk beneath the largest window, opening its drawer to reveal a leather-bound journal. "Dad's thoughts," he said simply. "He told me about it in our calls." Laura felt a stab of jealousy, quickly followed by shame. How much had Robert shared with their son that he had never shared with her? How many conversations had they had that she knew nothing about? Mike busied himself checking the cabin systems. The solar power setup, water filtration, propane tanks for the stove, and backup heat. Everything's in working order. Robert kept this place maintained better than most people care for houses on city grids. As Laura explored, she noticed subtle details that spoke volumes about the man Robert had become in his isolation. Bookshelves organized with military precision, medicinal herbs drying in bundles from kitchen rafters, a meditation corner with a simple cushion facing the sunrise, and everywhere photographs of Tyler, playing baseball, building sandcastles, drawing at his desk, carefully framed and positioned where they would catch the light at different times of day. There were no photographs of her. In the small bedroom, Laura found a wall of notes and diagrams, topographical maps of the surrounding area with handwritten observations, newspaper clippings about land development in the region, and photographs of construction equipment on previously pristine mountain meadows. At the center was a larger map with areas highlighted in red connected to what appeared to be wildlife migration routes. Robert was tracking Coleman's development plans, Mike explained from the doorway. When he first came here, it was just about finding peace. But then he discovered what Coleman was really doing. Damming streams for private lakes, cutting roads through critical habitat, basically destroying the ecosystem for profit. So Robert became an environmentalist. Mike shook his head. He became someone who couldn't stand by and watch another tragedy unfold when he had the power to stop it. The land his cabin sits on isn't just picturesque. It's the linchpin in Coleman's development plan. Without access through this property, he can't connect his luxury communities to the main road without adding millions to construction costs. A low rumble of thunder interrupted their conversation. Through the windows, dark clouds were gathering over the distant peaks, moving rapidly in their direction. Storm's coming faster than forecast. Mike frowned. I need to secure the ATVs and equipment at base camp. Will you be all right here tonight? I can return in the morning. Laura hesitated, looking around at the remote cabin that felt both alien and strangely welcoming. We'll be fine. Tyler seems to know his way around better than I do anyway. After Mike departed, Laura found Tyler sitting cross-legged on the porch, Robert's journal open in his lap. The boy's expression was solemn yet somehow peaceful, as if he had found something he'd been searching for. What does it say, Ty? Dad wrote about his nightmares, about the fire and the children he couldn't save, but he also wrote about this place helping him breathe again. Tyler traced his finger along the written words. He says the mountains don't judge you for your failures. They just stand silent while you find your way back to yourself. Laura sat beside her son, watching the approaching storm paint the valley in deepening shades of gray. Did you know about all this? The house, the environmental concerns, everything? Tyler shook his head. Not everything, but I knew Dad was building something important. He said it would be ours someday. A place where the noise in his head got quiet enough to hear what matters. The first heavy raindrops began to fall, pattering on the metal roof overhead. Tyler closed the journal carefully and stood. We should check the rain barrels. Dad said the system needs adjusting during heavy storms. Laura followed her son's lead, amazed at how confidently he moved through spaces he'd never physically been in before. Tyler showed her how the rainwater collection system fed into filtration tanks, how the solar batteries were stored in a protected compartment, how to operate the radio if they needed to contact the outside world. As darkness fell and the storm intensified, they prepared a simple meal from the well-stocked pantry. Sitting at the handcrafted table with thunder rolling across the peaks, Laura felt an unexpected sense of security, despite their precarious perch on the mountainside. Robert had built this place to withstand both external storms and internal ones. After dinner, Tyler insisted on checking the perimeter one last time before bed. Laura watched from the doorway as he methodically examined locks and shutters with a seriousness that seemed beyond his years. When a particularly bright flash of lightning illuminated the valley below, Tyler froze, pointing toward the main trail. Mom, there's someone down there. Laura squinted through the rain-lashed darkness. For a brief moment, another lightning strike revealed what looked like flashlight beams moving along the path they had ascended hours earlier. Probably just Mike coming back to check on us, she suggested, though doubt crept into her voice. Tyler shook his head firmly. No, 3 lights. Mike is alone. They retreated inside, securing the door and dimming the lanterns. Tyler moved with unexpected efficiency, gathering supplies into a small pack and retrieving a metal box from beneath the kitchen floorboards. A hiding place Laura would never have discovered on her own. Dad showed me where the emergency supplies are kept. He explained, opening the box to reveal a satellite phone, a handheld GPS unit, and a small but powerful flashlight. He said if strangers ever approached during a storm, we should call this number. The boy handed her a card with a single phone number, Frank Winter's contact information. Before Laura could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the storm. Not thunder, but something more deliberate. The cabin's front window shattered inward, sending glass skittering across the wooden floor. Tyler grabbed her hand, pulling her away from the windows. The back door, Mom. Hurry. As they moved toward the rear of the cabin, Laura caught a glimpse of shadowy figures approaching through the storm. Coleman's men coming to ensure Robert's property would no longer stand in their way, and perhaps to eliminate any evidence Robert might have gathered against them. Tyler led her to a narrow door half hidden behind a bookshelf. It opened to reveal a steep path descending along the cliff face, partially sheltered by overhanging rock. Dad's escape route, Tyler whispered, in case of fire or danger. As they slipped out into the howling storm, Laura realized that Robert had prepared for this moment, had perhaps even expected it. The realization that her ex-husband had built not just a sanctuary but a fortress, complete with escape routes and hidden supplies, painted a picture of a man far more strategic and aware than the broken soul who had walked away from their marriage. They huddled beneath a rocky overhang, rain driving sideways across the mountainside, watching as flashlight beams swept through the cabin they had just abandoned. Laura clutched the satellite phone, her thumb hovering over the call button. Whatever Robert had been involved in, whatever evidence he had gathered against Coleman, had likely cost him his life. Now it threatened theirs as well. Tyler pressed against her side, his small body trembling, not with fear but with a kind of electric anticipation. In the intermittent lightning flashes, his expression showed not the terror she expected, but the focused determination she had so often seen on Robert's face when confronting a challenge. For the first time, she truly saw her ex-husband in their son's features. The same quiet strength, the same ability to remain calm in crisis. "We need to find Dad's evidence," Tyler said, his voice nearly lost in the storm's fury. "It's why they're here. It's why they killed him." Laura stared at her son, shocked by his certainty. "Heather, we don't know that your father was murdered. The police said it was an accident." Lightning illuminated the boy's face, his expression older than his years. "Dad never had accidents on mountains, Mom, never." As they crouched in their precarious shelter, the storm raging around them, and intruders searching the cabin above, Laura realized they had reached a turning point. They could flee back to civilization, perhaps accept Coleman's offer, and leave this dangerous situation behind. Or they could stay a search for whatever evidence Robert had gathered and potentially bring justice to those responsible for his death. The satellite phone felt heavy in her hand, Frank Winter's number still undialed. Whatever choice she made now would set their path forward, retreat into safety, or advance into the unknown dangers Robert had faced alone. Tyler reached over and pressed the call button, making the decision for them both. His voice was quiet but unwavering as he spoke into the phone. "Mr. Winters, they're here at Dad's house. We need help." The storm's fury seemed to intensify, lightning striking closer, thunder shaking the very mountain beneath them. But in that moment, huddled on a cliff edge with her son taking charge beyond his years, Laura felt something unexpected bloom within her chest. Not just fear, but a fierce determination. Robert had built this place as a sanctuary, had fought to protect it in the wilderness around it. Perhaps it was time for her to understand why it had meant enough to die for. The storm howled around them, a rain pelting the rocky overhang that provided their minimal shelter. Lightning flashed across the valley, momentarily illuminating the steep drop mere inches from their feet. Through sheets of driving rain, Laura could see flashlight beams sweeping methodically through Robert's cabin, searching, destroying. Frank Winter's voice crackled through the satellite phone, barely audible above the thunder. "Stay hidden. I'm 3 hours out. There's an emergency shelter your husband built." Tyler interrupted, his small face set with determination. "The Eagle's Nest. I know where it is." He pointed down the treacherous path that snaked along the cliffside. "Dad showed me on his maps. It's halfway down, hidden in the rock face." Laura hesitated, eyeing the narrow trail now slick with rainwater. One misstep in the darkness would send them plummeting hundreds of feet to the valley below. But staying put meant eventual discovery by whoever was ransacking the cabin. Tyler pulled something from his pocket, a small metal object that caught the next lightning flash. The compass Robert had sent, its cracked face somehow still functional. "Dad said always trust the compass, not your eyes. The path looks like it goes right, but we need to go left here." The boy moved with surprising confidence, one hand trailing against the rock wall, the other gripping Laura's wrist. Each step required absolute focus. The path barely wide enough for their feet, visibility reduced to the small circle illuminated by Tyler's flashlight. After 15 harrowing minutes, Tyler stopped at what appeared to be a solid rock face. He ran his hands over the surface, searching. "There should be a..." His fingers caught on a nearly invisible crevice. With a grunt of effort, he pulled, revealing a cunningly disguised door built into the mountainside itself. The space beyond was small but remarkably dry. A natural cave Robert had expanded and reinforced. Emergency supplies lined one wall. Water-dried food, first aid kit, blankets. A battery-powered lantern cast warm light over the shelter once Tyler switched it on. Laura sank onto a camp stool, legs trembling from adrenaline and exertion. "How did you know about this place?" Tyler busied himself with the supplies, methodically checking each item, just as Robert would have. "Dad drew it in his letters, said it was our secret hideout if things got bad." He unfolded a metallic emergency blanket, wrapping it around Laura's shoulders before taking another for himself. He knew they might come someday. The implications hit Laura like a physical blow. Robert had anticipated violence, had prepared escape routes, hidden shelters, emergency supplies, had taught their son survival skills through stories and video calls, knowing the boy might someday need them. The man she had divorced, the broken firefighter consumed by PTSD, had transformed into someone strategic, forward-thinking, even as he battled his inner demons. Tyler unfolded a topographical map stored in a waterproof case, spreading it on the small folding table. Red markings crisscrossed the valleys and ridges surrounding Robert's property. Dad's research, Tyler explained. The X marks show where Coleman's company damaged protected habitats. The circles are endangered species nesting sites. Laura studied the markings with growing understanding. Robert hadn't just been hiding in the mountains. He'd been documenting environmental violations that could potentially stop Coleman's developments and cost him millions. Is this why Coleman wanted your father's land so badly to cover up these violations? Tyler shook his head. Not just that, look. He pointed to where Robert's property was marked in blue. Dad's land controls the only viable road access to the upper valley. Without it, Coleman can't connect his developments without spending millions on alternative routes. A particularly violent thunderclap shook the small shelter. Tyler flinched momentarily, reminding Laura that despite his composure, he was still just an 8-year-old boy hiding from dangerous men in a mountainside during a raging storm. She pulled him close, feeling his small body trembling slightly against hers. Your dad would be so proud of you, Ty. You've been incredibly brave. Tyler's face pressed against her shoulder. I miss him. Even before he died, I missed him. The simple admission broke something open inside Laura. For 2 years, she had harbored resentment toward Robert for abandoning their family, for retreating into silence, and then physically removing himself from their lives. Now she began to see another perspective. A man so damaged by trauma that he feared his own presence might harm those he loved most. The satellite phone buzzed. Frank's voice came through clearer now. I've reached the trailhead. Storm's slowing me down. How many intruders? Laura described the 3 flashlight beams they'd seen. They broke in through the front window. We escaped down the cliff path. Smart move. Those are Coleman's security team, ex-military types he hires for his special projects. Stay put. I'm bringing help. The connection cut off, leaving them alone with the storm and the knowledge that armed men were hunting them. Laura checked the time, nearly midnight. Even if Frank moved quickly, dawn would break before help arrived. Tyler had returned to the map, studying it with intense concentration. There's something wrong here, he muttered, tracing a section where several trails converged. Dad marked this area differently in his letters to me. Laura looked over his shoulder. The map showed a valley intersection marked with a simple X, but nothing that seemed significant. What did his letter say? Tyler retrieved the wooden box containing Robert's correspondence, pulling out a folded paper. It contained a simplified map drawn in Robert's distinctive style. The same valley intersection was marked with a star and the words, "Heart of the matter," beside it. Dad sent this 3 weeks ago. He said it was important I remember this spot. Tyler compared the 2 maps. He wanted me to find something there. Laura studied both maps. Could it be where he hid evidence against Coleman? Something too important to keep at the cabin. Tyler nodded slowly. The last time we talked, Dad said he had found the missing piece, something that would change everything. He sounded excited but scared too. A new urgency filled the small shelter. Whatever Robert had discovered in those final weeks might explain his death and provide protection against Coleman. But reaching that valley intersection would require traversing miles of mountain terrain, potentially with armed pursuers on their trail. The storm gradually weakened over the next hours, thunder receding into distant rumbles. Through a small observation port in the shelter door, they watched dawn break over the mountains, painting the rain-washed landscape in pale gold light. No movement came from the direction of the cabin. Either the intruders had given up their search or were waiting in ambush. Either way, they couldn't remain in the small shelter indefinitely. Tyler packed a small backpack with essential supplies: water, energy bars, first aid kit, the satellite phone, and Robert's maps. We should go to the Heart, find what Dad left there. Laura hesitated. The rational choice would be to wait for Frank and his promised help. But every instinct told her that time was critical. If Coleman's men found Robert's evidence first, any chance of justice would vanish. They emerged cautiously from the shelter, Tyler leading the way down a different path than they had ascended. The boy moved with the confidence of someone following a route they had memorized, pointing out markers only he seemed able to recognize. A lightning-struck tree, a distinctive rock formation, a cluster of rare alpine flowers. Dad described everything in his stories, Tyler explained. He said good storytelling creates maps in your mind more detailed than anything on paper. The path descended steadily, zigzagging down the mountainside until they reached a small stream swollen with rainwater. Tyler crouched at the water's edge, examining the muddy bank with focused attention. Someone crossed here recently. Big boots, deep impressions. Laura felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Coleman's men must have discovered their escape and were now tracking them through the wilderness. Tyler pointed upstream. We need to go that way, follow the water to hide our scent and footprints. Scent like from dogs. Dad said some of Coleman's security used to be military trackers. They know how to hunt people. Tyler waded into the frigid stream, wincing as the water reached his knees. We have to be smarter. Laura followed, teeth chattering as the mountain runoff soaked through her hiking boots. They traveled upstream for nearly half a mile before Tyler led them out onto a rocky shelf where they would leave no footprints. The morning warmed as they traveled the post-storm landscape, vibrant with life. Under different circumstances, Laura might have appreciated the breathtaking scenery. Towering pine forests, meadows carpeted with wildflowers, distant peaks still capped with snow, despite the summer season. Now, every beautiful vista represented potential exposure, every open space a vulnerability. Tyler navigated with unnerving precision, consulting Robert's map occasionally, but mostly relying on his mental image of the terrain. By mid-morning, they had covered several miles, descending into a forested valley that offered better concealment. They paused in a small clearing to rest and eat. Tyler pulled a familiar object from his backpack, his stuffed bear, now looking somewhat worse for wear after their adventures. I thought you'd left that at the cabin, Laura said, surprised to see the childhood comfort item. Tyler unzipped a small opening in the bear's back, pulling out a USB drive. Dad told me to always keep important things in places nobody would look. He held up the drive. I found this hidden in Dad's desk before those men came. I think it has his research on it. Laura stared at the small device that might contain the evidence Robert had died protecting. Without a computer, they couldn't access its contents, but its very existence represented hope, proof that could potentially bring Coleman to justice. Their brief rest was interrupted by a distant sound, the mechanical growl of ATV engines. Coleman's men had mobilized vehicles to search the wider area. Tyler quickly repacked his bear and shouldered his backpack. We need to reach the valley intersection before they find the trail. Dad said there's a place to hide there. They pushed forward with renewed urgency, leaving the relative protection of the forest for a more exposed ridge that would allow faster travel. The risk of visibility was counterbalanced by the need for speed, and Tyler led them along natural depressions and rock formations that offered some concealment from distant observers. The ATV sounds occasionally drifted to them on the wind, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, creating a constant undercurrent of anxiety. Laura found herself constantly scanning their surroundings, jumping at every snapped twig or rustling bush. By early afternoon, the terrain changed, descending into a lush valley where three smaller valleys converged, the intersection marked on both maps. A river cut through the center, fed by streams from each tributary valley. Tyler stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking this junction, his brow furrowed in concentration. This is it, the heart of the matter. He surveyed the landscape below, searching for something only he seemed to understand. There, he finally pointed to a distinctive rock formation near the river, a natural arch formed by centuries of water erosion. The descent to the valley floor was steep but manageable thanks to a game trail that wound down the hillside. As they approached the stone arch, Tyler grew visibly excited, moving ahead with renewed energy. Dad wrote about this place in his last letter. He called it nature's cathedral and said it holds secrets for those who know how to listen. The boy ducked beneath the arch, running his hands along the weathered stone surface. There should be a mark somewhere, something he left for us. Laura joined in the search, examining the rock face for anything man-made among the natural textures. Minutes passed without discovery, the constant awareness of pursuit adding pressure to their efforts. Tyler suddenly dropped to his knees, brushing away leaves and dirt from the ground beneath the arch. There, carved into a flat stone and nearly invisible unless you knew to look, was a simple symbol, the Big Dipper constellation matching the lock configuration from Robert's cabin. It's here. Tyler's fingers traced the carving, pressing on each star in sequence. Nothing happened. He frowned, trying again with a different pattern. Laura crouched beside him, studying the carving more closely. Unlike the neat precision of the cabin lock, this had been done hastily with what appeared to be a knife or other improvised tool. Robert had created this marker under pressure, perhaps even as he was being pursued himself. Try it backwards, she suggested. Start from the last star instead of the first. Tyler followed her suggestion. On the final press, a section of stone shifted slightly with a grating sound. Together, they pushed against it, revealing a small cavity beneath. Inside lay a waterproof container about the size of a lunchbox. Tyler retrieved it with trembling hands. The container was secured with a combination lock, a simple 3-digit mechanism. He tried the same pattern that had revealed the hiding spot, but it didn't work. What would your dad use something meaningful to both of you? Tyler thought for a moment, then dialed in a new combination 729. The lock clicked open. My birthday, he explained, July 29th. Inside the container lay a leather-bound journal, similar to the one they'd found in the cabin, several USB drives labeled with dates in a small voice recorder. Most surprising was an envelope addressed to Laura in Robert's handwriting. Before she could open it, the distinct rumble of approaching ATVs echoed through the valley. They had minutes at most before discovery. We need to hide, Laura whispered, scanning their surroundings for options. The river offered one possibility. Following it downstream might allow them to evade pursuit, but would mean abandoning the high ground and potential escape routes. Tyler pointed to a dense thicket of undergrowth nearby. There, Dad wrote about hiding there when he was tracking elk. It's deeper than it looks. They squeezed into the natural blind, pulling branches to conceal the opening. Through gaps in the foliage, they watched as 2 ATVs emerged from a trail on the opposite side of the valley. 3 men dismounted, all wearing similar dark clothing and carrying what appeared to be hunting rifles, though Laura suspected hunting animals wasn't their purpose. The men spread out, methodically searching the area. One approached the stone arch, examining it with obvious familiarity. He ran his hands over the same surfaces they had just explored minutes earlier, focusing on the carved constellation. Laura held her breath. Tyler pressed against her side, both perfectly still, as the man knelt and found the shifted stone. His excited call brought the others running. Someone's been here recently, the first man announced, holding up the empty cavity for inspection. The cache is gone. The apparent leader of the group surveyed the surrounding area with narrow eyes. They can't have gone far. Widen the search. They'll head for the main road eventually. There's nowhere else to go. The men remounted their vehicles and split up, 2 heading downstream along the river, while the third climbed back toward the ridge they had descended earlier. The mechanical roar gradually faded, though Laura knew they were simply expanding their search perimeter rather than abandoning it. When relative silence returned, Tyler whispered, "They know about Dad's hiding place. How?" The question hung between them, its implications disturbing. Either Robert had been forced to reveal information before his death, or someone he trusted had betrayed him. They remained hidden for another hour, the afternoon shadows lengthening across the valley floor. Finally, when no sounds of pursuit had returned, they emerged cautiously from their concealment. "We should check what Dad left," Tyler urged, pointing to the container, now secured in Laura's backpack. "Not here, we're too exposed." She studied the terrain, considering options. "Which way would your father go if he needed a secure place to examine sensitive materials?" Tyler pointed to the smallest of the 3 tributary valleys, a narrow passage that appeared to climb steeply back into the mountains. "Dad called that the sanctuary. He said the terrain is too difficult for vehicles, and there's a cavern system halfway up with fresh water and multiple exits." They set off immediately, climbing steadily through increasingly rugged landscape. True to Tyler's description, the narrow valley soon became impassable for any vehicle, with sections requiring scrambling over boulders and navigating around waterfalls. By early evening, they reached a rock face with a narrow opening partially concealed by vegetation. Tyler pushed through without hesitation, revealing a cavern beyond, dry, relatively warm, with filtered light entering through small fissures in the ceiling. "Dad's shelter," he announced with satisfaction. He stayed here sometimes when tracking Coleman's construction crews. The space showed signs of previous occupation: a stone-ringed fire pit, flat rocks arranged as makeshift furniture, even crude shelves carved into the wall holding emergency supplies similar to those in the cliffside shelter. Robert had created a network of safe houses throughout these mountains, preparing for exactly the situation they now found themselves in. Laura set up the small, battery-powered lantern from their pack, while Tyler gathered wood for a small fire. The temperature had dropped with the sun, and the mountain night promised to be cold despite the summer season. Once they had light and warmth, Laura finally removed the container from her pack. The journal inside was filled with Robert's meticulous notes, dates times photographs, and detailed observations of Coleman's operations. Pages documented illegal dumping, endangered species, habitat destruction, unauthorized use of protected lands, and what appeared to be falsified environmental impact statements. Your father was building a legal case, Laura realized, flipping through the damning evidence. This would not only stop Coleman's development, but could result in criminal charges. The voice recorder contained dozens of files, each labeled with dates matching entries in the journal. Laura played one at random, hearing Robert's voice for the first time in over a year. The familiar cadence sent an unexpected wave of emotion through her. June 12th, observed Coleman construction crew diverting the north tributary of Eagle Creek. Unauthorized dam construction affecting downstream flow to protected wetlands. Photographed equipment, serial numbers, and worker identifications. Second violation this month. Tyler sat perfectly still, eyes closed, absorbing the sound of his father's voice. The recordings continued, documenting months of systematic observation and evidence gathering. Robert had been thorough professional, building a comprehensive case that would be difficult to dismiss. The final recording, dated just 3 days before his death, carried a different tone. Robert's voice was tense, urgent. "They know I'm watching. Security patrol almost caught me photographing the chemical dumping yesterday. Changed my route back, took precautions, but Coleman's getting suspicious. Made contact with EPA investigator Hamilton today. Scheduled meeting for next week to hand over all evidence. If anything happens before then, Frank has instructions." Laura and Tyler exchanged glances. Robert had known he was in danger, had been taking active steps to protect himself, yet somehow he had still ended up dead on a mountain trail. With hands that trembled slightly, Laura finally opened the envelope addressed to her. Inside was a single page covered in Robert's familiar handwriting. "Laura, if you're writing this, things didn't go as planned. I'm sorry for leaving you and Tyler the way I did. The fire broke something inside me that I couldn't fix while being around the people I loved most. I was afraid my darkness would poison you both. This mountain gave me space to heal, to remember who I was before the nightmares. What started as an escape became a purpose when I discovered what Coleman was doing to this wilderness. Some battles choose you. This one chose me. Everything I've gathered is in the journal and drives. It's enough to stop him if it reaches the right people. Trust Frank Winters. He was my spotter in the Air Force, my partner when everything went wrong. He knows what to do. And Laura, I was coming home. Not the same man who left, but someone stronger, someone who had found his way back. Tell Tyler I kept every promise. The house was for both of you, a place of healing, a place to start again." The letter ended with a simple, "I'm sorry," the words pressed deeply into the paper as if written with particular force. Laura folded the letter carefully, tucking it into her pocket. The Robert who had written these words was not the broken man who had walked away from their marriage, but neither was he the carefree young firefighter she had fallen in love with years ago. He was someone new, forged through suffering into a person with purpose and clarity she had never glimpsed during their final years together. Tyler watched her with solemn eyes. Dad was coming back to us, wasn't he? The simple question carried the weight of 2 years of abandonment, of bedtime tears and birthday parties with an empty chair. Laura couldn't offer false comfort even to ease her son's pain. He was finding his way back, Ty. Whether he would have succeeded, we'll never know. But he was trying. The satellite phone buzzed, startling them both. Frank's voice came through, tense and hushed. "Where are you? Coleman's men are swarming the mountains." Laura described their location as best she could, including the landmarks they had passed. "I know it," Frank confirmed. "Robert showed me once. Stay put. I'm about 2 hours out with reinforcements. Have you found anything?" "Everything. Robert's entire case against Coleman. Journals, recordings, photographic evidence." A moment of silence, then Frank's voice tight with emotion. "He did it. The stubborn fool actually pulled it together." Another pause. "Coleman's getting desperate. A contact at the sheriff's department says he's reported armed trespassers on his property, meaning you. He's trying to frame you as eco-terrorists or some nonsense." The implications were chilling. If Coleman's security found them before Frank arrived, they could be shot as dangerous trespassers with minimal questions asked. The local authorities already in Coleman's pocket would ensure a cursory investigation at best. "We'll stay hidden until you reach us," Laura promised, though uneasiness churned in her stomach. The cavern offered protection, but also potential entrapment if discovered. After ending the call, she turned to find Tyler examining one of the USB drives they'd recovered. "I wish we could see what's on these. Dad said the most important evidence was digital." Laura surveyed the sparse shelter, an idea forming. "Your father was thorough in his preparations. If he spent significant time here documenting Coleman's activities, he would have needed to review his digital files." They began searching the cavern, systematically checking behind rock formations and in natural crevices. Tyler discovered the solution: a waterproof case wedged into a narrow fissure near the back of the cave. Inside lay an older model laptop specially ruggedized for outdoor use, along with a solar charging panel. "Dad's field computer," Tyler explained, handling it with reverence. "He showed it to me during video calls, said it was his truth machine." The laptop's battery was dead, but the solar charger still functioned. They positioned it to catch the last rays of evening sun filtering through the cavern's light fissures. It would take time to generate enough power for even brief use, but it represented their best chance to understand the full scope of Robert's evidence. As darkness settled fully outside, Tyler arranged his small sleeping space near the fire exhaustion, finally catching up with his young body. Despite the circumstances, he fell asleep quickly, one hand still clutching his father's compass. Laura maintained the watch, periodically checking the laptop as it slowly accumulated charge. The waiting gave her unwelcome time to think about Robert, about the life they had shared, and lost, about the man he had become in these mountains. She had spent 2 years nursing anger toward him for abandoning their family. Now she faced the uncomfortable realization that his departure might have been an act of protection rather than desertion. The PTSD that had hollowed him out after the Mason Street fire had been a wound she couldn't see or understand, one he had chosen to heal away from them rather than risk harming them through his struggle. Near midnight, the laptop finally held enough charge for brief use. Laura connected one of the USB drives, holding her breath as the device whirred to life. File after file appeared, organized, dated, meticulously labeled. Robert's military precision extended to his environmental whistleblowing. She opened a video file marked Toxic Dumping, Site 3, and watched in growing horror as night vision footage showed trucks emptying barrels of chemicals directly into a pristine mountain stream. The camera panned to show the Coleman Construction logo clearly visible on the vehicles. Another file contained aerial photographs of clear-cutting in areas marked as protected forest preserve. A third showed falsified permit applications with Coleman's signature authorizing construction in restricted wildlife corridors. The evidence was comprehensive, damning, and explained exactly why Gregory Coleman would resort to murder to prevent its release. Robert had built an airtight case that would not only halt Coleman's developments, but likely send him to federal prison. A noise outside the cavern entrance froze Laura in place, the distinctive crunch of boots on gravel. She quickly powered down the laptop, plunging the cave into darkness, save for the dying embers of their small fire. Tyler remained asleep, mercifully quiet in his exhaustion. Laura reached for the satellite phone, intending to alert Frank, but stopped at the sound of voices just outside, too close for her to risk speaking. Instead, she positioned herself between the entrance and Tyler, pulling the hunting knife from their emergency pack. Flashlight beams swept across the cavern opening, sending fractured light patterns dancing across the rock walls. Laura held her breath, pressing back into the shadows, praying that the natural camouflage of vegetation would conceal the entrance enough to discourage closer inspection. "Nothing here," a gruff voice announced. "Just another dead end." "Keep looking," came the reply. "Coleman wants them found tonight. Said they have materials that could cause irreparable damage to company interests. In English, they can prove he's been breaking every environmental law in the books." A third voice, sharper with authority: "That's enough. 5 more minutes here, then we move to the next quadrant." The beams continued their methodical sweep, coming dangerously close to where Laura hid. One light paused on the entrance vegetation, illuminating unusual movement or arrangement that had caught the searchers' attention. Laura tightened her grip on the knife, calculating her options if they entered. The cavern offered few advantages in a direct confrontation, especially against armed opponents. Her only hope would be to buy enough time for Tyler to escape through one of the secondary exits he had mentioned. The light lingered seconds, stretching into small eternities. Then mercifully it moved on. "Radio check," the authoritative voice commanded. After brief confirmations from multiple units, he continued. "New information. Winters has been spotted approaching from the North Ridge. At least 2 others with him. Withdraw to defensive positions at base camp. We'll intercept them there." The lights disappeared, footsteps receding into the night. Laura remained frozen for several minutes, ensuring they were truly gone before allowing herself to breathe normally again. Frank was close, with help, but Coleman's men were setting an ambush. She woke Tyler with a gentle hand over his mouth to prevent any startled exclamation. His eyes flashed open instantly, alert despite the abrupt awakening. "They were here," she whispered. "They've gone to intercept Frank. We need to warn him." Tyler nodded, immediately gathering their essential supplies, while Laura attempted to reach Frank on the satellite phone. No response came. Either he was out of range or had silenced his communications to avoid detection. "We have to go to him," Tyler insisted, already shouldering his pack. "Dad would say, don't let your friends walk into traps." Laura hesitated. The rational choice would be to remain hidden, protected by the cavern that had already saved them once. But Frank was walking into danger because of them, because of Robert's mission. Abandoning him felt like betraying Robert all over again. They emerged cautiously into the mountain night, now brilliantly illuminated by a full moon that had risen while they sheltered. The silvery light transformed the landscape into an otherworldly terrain of sharp shadows and glowing surfaces, beautiful but dangerously exposing. Tyler pointed to a steep ridge rising to their right. "That's the north approach." Frank would come that way from the main road. The climb was grueling, loose rock, sliding beneath their feet, hands grasping at vegetation for stability. Tyler set the pace, moving with surprising strength and endurance for his age. Laura followed, muscles burning from exertion, driven by urgency and the knowledge that lives depended on their warning. Near the ridge top, Tyler suddenly dropped to a crouch, pulling Laura down beside him. Below, in a natural bowl-shaped depression, lights moved in a deliberate pattern, Coleman's security team establishing their ambush positions. From their elevated vantage point, Laura could see approximately 8 men, all armed, strategically placed to cover the trail leading from the north. "Frank will walk right into it," she whispered. Tyler pointed to a parallel ridge about half a mile distant. "There's another trail there. Dad used it as his secret route. If we can reach it, maybe we can intercept Frank before he hits the main path." Laura assessed the terrain between them and the second ridge. A deep gully with a stream at the bottom, then a steep climb up the opposing slope. Difficult traversing in daylight, potentially treacherous in moonlight, but their only viable option. They backtracked slightly to find a manageable descent into the gully. The stream at the bottom ran fast with snowmelt, forcing them to wade through frigid water that numbed their feet and soaked their clothing to the knees. The opposite climb proved even more challenging. Loose shale that shifted underfoot, sparse vegetation, offering minimal handholds. Halfway up, disaster struck. Tyler reached for what appeared to be a sturdy root, only for it to pull free from the soil. He slid backward with a startled gasp, dislodging a cascade of rocks that clattered noisily down the slope before splashing into the stream below. They froze, listening intently for any reaction from Coleman's men. For several heartbeats, only natural night sounds reached them. Then came distant voices, the beam of a powerful flashlight sweeping the gully they had just crossed. "Move!" Laura hissed, abandoning caution for speed. They scrambled upward, hands and knees scraping against rock clothing, catching on thorny vegetation. Behind them, lights approached, their position compromised, pursuit imminent. They crested the ridge just as shouts confirmed their discovery. Tyler pointed urgently along the ridgeline. This way, Frank should be coming up that draw. They ran stumbling on the uneven ground, guided only by moonlight and Tyler's uncanny knowledge of the terrain. The sounds of pursuit grew louder. Multiple voices, the crash of vegetation as Coleman's men closed the distance. A clearing opened before them and Tyler skidded to a halt. Below, 3 figures moved steadily up the trail, Frank and his reinforcements unwittingly approaching the ambush site. "Frank!" Laura shouted, throwing caution aside. "Stop, ambush ahead." The figures below froze, then quickly moved into defensive positions among the trees. One detached from the group, working up toward them with remarkable speed despite the difficult terrain. Frank Winters materialized from the shadows, a weathered, lean man in his 60s, with alert eyes and the quiet movement of someone accustomed to wilderness navigation. Behind him, 2 younger men in Forest Service uniforms maintained vigilant watch on their surroundings. "Laura, Tyler." Frank acknowledged them with a quick nod. "Glad we found you." His attention shifted immediately to the sounds of pursuit coming from behind them. "How many?" "At least 8 that we saw, armed with rifles. They've set up an ambush in the basin below the North Ridge." Frank processed this information with military efficiency. "My colleagues are Forest Service law enforcement. We need to get you and the evidence to safety." Tyler stepped forward, offering the container with Robert's documentation. "Dad left everything we need to stop Coleman." Frank accepted it with gentle hands, a flash of emotion crossing his features before his professional demeanor reasserted itself. "Robert was thorough, always was." He signaled to one of his companions. "Jenkins, get them to the vehicles. Marshall and I will delay pursuit." The Forest Service officer moved toward them, but Tyler balked. "No, we need to stay together. Dad said never split up in mountain terrain." Frank knelt to meet Tyler at eye level. Your father's last request was that I get you and your mother to safety along with his evidence. This isn't up for debate, son. A gunshot cracked through the night, the bullet splintering bark from a tree just feet away. Everyone dropped instinctively. Go, Frank urged, pushing them toward Officer Jenkins while he and Marshall took up defensive positions. Jenkins led them away at a run, following a different trail than either their approach or the ambush route. Behind them, more shots echoed, followed by Frank's voice shouting official warnings and identification. Federal officers, drop your weapons. The firefight receded as Jenkins guided them through dense forest, eventually emerging onto a narrow service road where an unmarked Forest Service truck waited. He helped them into the vehicle, immediately starting the engine. Where are we going? Laura asked as they bounced along the rough track. Ranger Station 12 miles north. It's defensible and has communication equipment to call in federal reinforcements. Frank will meet us there if he can. The if hung heavily in the air as they drove through the night. Tyler pressed against Laura's side, his earlier confidence giving way to the exhaustion and fear natural to an 8-year-old boy who had endured too much. The ranger station appeared just as dawn began lightening the eastern sky, a sturdy log structure surrounded by a cleared perimeter and equipped with solar panels, radio antennas, and security lighting. Jenkins ushered them inside, immediately activating a sophisticated communication system. This is Forest Service Law Enforcement Officer Jenkins, requesting emergency federal assistance at Clearwater Station. Code 37, repeat code 37. The response came immediately, formal acknowledgement of what Laura gathered was a serious situation requiring rapid intervention. Jenkins secured the building methodically, checking locks, positioning himself with clear sight lines to all approaches. Help will be here within the hour. Until then, we maintain defensive positions. Tyler had found a topographical map of the region mounted on the station wall. He studied it intently, finger tracing the route they had traveled. Dad explored all of this, he said quietly. Every valley, every ridge. He knew the mountains better than anyone. The observation carried a weight beyond the simple words, acknowledgement of both loss and legacy. Robert had mapped these mountains physically and through the stories he shared with his son. Now that knowledge had potentially saved their lives. As the sun crested the eastern peaks, casting long shadows across the station clearing, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors grew in the distance. Jenkins visibly relaxed. Federal backup. We're secure now. The black helicopter that settled onto the clearing bore U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service markings. 4 armed officers deplaned, followed by a man in a suit who identified himself as Special Agent Harmon. We've received your evidence package via Officer Marshall, he informed them. Initial assessment indicates multiple federal violations. We've already issued emergency orders halting all Coleman construction activities pending investigation. Laura felt a surge of vindication for Robert, quickly followed by concern. What about Frank and Officer Marshall? They stayed behind to cover our escape. Marshall made contact. He and Winters are currently directing a multi-agency team securing the evidence sites your husband documented. Several arrests have already been made. The pieces were falling into place. Robert's meticulous work, his sacrifice culminating in the justice he had sought. Yet a hollow space remained where celebration should be. He should have been there to see it. As if reading her thoughts, Tyler spoke up. Dad knew this would happen. In his last letter, he wrote that sometimes you plant trees knowing you'll never sit in their shade. The simple wisdom from such a young voice silenced the room. Robert had indeed planted something that would outlast him. Not just evidence against corruption, but knowledge and resilience in his son, who stood now as living testimony to his father's legacy. Through the station window, the rising sun illuminated the cabin on the distant cliff. Robert's final creation, his gift to the family he had loved, even in his darkest moments. Whatever happened next, that sanctuary would remain a place of healing, built by a broken man who had found his way back to himself through the very act of creating it. The radio crackled with Frank's voice announcing their safe return. Tyler pressed his hand against the glass as if reaching across the distance to connect with his father's oldest friend in the mountains that had become his legacy. We did it, Dad, he whispered. We found what you left for us. The federal officers arrived with the sunrise, their black SUVs forming a protective perimeter around the ranger station. Laura watched through the window as teams deployed with practiced efficiency, some establishing communications, others consulting maps of the surrounding wilderness. The evidence they had recovered from Robert's hidden cache was being processed in real time, transformed from one man's solitary investigation into a multi-agency operation. Tyler had fallen asleep on a cot in the corner, his small body finally surrendering to exhaustion after days of extraordinary endurance. Laura studied her son's face peaceful in sleep, wondering at the resilience he had shown. The quiet, withdrawn boy who had barely spoken for months had navigated mountain trails with uncanny confidence, remembered complex instructions from a father he rarely saw, and faced armed pursuers with a composure that defied his 8 years. Special Agent Harmon approached with fresh coffee. We've received preliminary confirmation that Coleman's security team members match descriptions of individuals at the site where your husband's climbing equipment was tampered with. He set his voice low to avoid waking Tyler. Forensics is still processing, but it's looking more like homicide than accident. The confirmation of what they had suspected settled heavily in Laura's chest. Robert hadn't simply fallen, he had been deliberately silenced. The knowledge brought a strange mixture of vindication and renewed grief. What happens next? She asked, her gaze returning to the mountains visible through the window where Robert's cabin perched on its dramatic cliff edge. Coleman and his top lieutenants are in custody, federal charges being prepared for environmental violations, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and likely murder. Harmon paused. The property your husband purchased remains yours to manage as trustee for your son. Once the investigation secures all necessary evidence, you'll have full access again. Laura considered the situation. A week ago, the idea of keeping a remote mountain cabin would have seemed absurd. Their life was in Portland, or had been until job loss and rising rent had made that future untenable. Now looking at the wilderness that had given Robert purpose in his darkest hours, she felt a pull she hadn't anticipated. Frank Winters entered the room, his weathered face showing the strain of the past 24 hours, but with a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. He nodded toward the sleeping Tyler. Kid's got his father's instincts. Robert would be proud. You've known Robert a long time, Laura asked. Though they'd been working closely through this crisis, she realized how little she knew about Frank's connection to her ex-husband. Since Air Force days, we were spotters together, his eyes my rifle, the kind of partnership that forges trust beyond questioning. Frank settled into a chair, his gaze distant with memory. When he left the service and joined the fire department, we stayed in touch. After the Mason Street fire, I was one of the few people he'd still talk to, maybe because I understood something about carrying ghosts. The mention of their military connection filled in another piece of the puzzle. Robert had rarely spoken of his service years, maintaining the same stoic silence about that chapter as he eventually had about his firefighting trauma. Why didn't Mike Henderson come with you last night? Laura asked, suddenly realizing the absence of the man who had guided them to the cabin. Frank's expression darkened slightly. Mike's good people, but he's got complicated connections in this community. His nephew works security for Coleman Developments, not one of the ones directly involved in the harassment, but close enough that Mike thought it best to keep his distance once federal agencies got involved. Another piece clicked into place. The betrayal of Robert's hiding places, the knowledge Coleman's men had shown of the trails and shelters. Someone connected to Mike might have been the leak, whether Mike knew it or not. As morning advanced, Tyler stirred and woke immediately, alert and taking in the changed situation at the ranger station. Laura watched him methodically fold his blanket, check his backpack, and approach Agent Harmon with direct questions about the evidence recovery process that would have seemed precocious from a child twice his age. By mid-morning, a strategy meeting convened in the station's main room. Maps of the region covered every available surface, with Robert's documented environmental violation sites marked in red. Federal agents from multiple agencies, Fish and Wildlife, EPA, Forest Service, law enforcement, coordinated efforts to secure evidence at each location before Coleman's remaining employees could destroy anything. What about our cabin? Tyler asked during a lull in the planning. When can we go back? The room fell quiet, adults exchanging glances at the unexpected question with its implied assumption of return. Laura realized Tyler had already made the mental transition from visitors to inhabitants, claiming the mountain refuge as home. Frank answered before she could. Evidence team will finish processing today. Structural assessment tomorrow to check for any damage Coleman's men might have caused. After that, it's up to you and your mom. Tyler nodded, satisfied, and returned to studying the topographical maps with the same intense focus he brought to all tasks. Laura caught Frank watching the boy with a mixture of amusement and respect. He's already planning improvements to the security system, Frank commented quietly. Asked me about installing motion sensors at key approach points. Despite everything, Laura felt a smile tug at her lips. He gets that from his father. Always 3 steps ahead. Speaking of planning ahead, Frank said, his tone shifting to something more deliberate. There's something you should see, something Robert was working on beyond the environmental case. From his weathered backpack, the Frank produced a tablet. Robert sent me this 2 weeks before he died with instructions to share it with you if anything happened to him. I think he sensed the danger was escalating. The screen displayed architectural renderings, professional-grade designs for expanding the cabin property with additional small structures nestled harmoniously into the mountainside. Notes in the margins described healing spaces and trauma recovery cabins with references to PTSD treatment protocols. He was creating a retreat center, Laura realized, studying the thoughtful integration of buildings with the natural landscape, for firefighters and first responders suffering from trauma. Frank nodded. Project Phoenix, he called it. A place where those who walk through fire could find their way back. He scrolled to show additional documents, preliminary outreach to veterans organizations, research on nature-based therapy approaches, grant application drafts. The revelation shifted something fundamental in Laura's understanding of the past 2 years. Robert hadn't just been hiding in the wilderness. He had been rebuilding himself while creating something that could help others rebuild themselves too. His separation from his family hadn't been the end of his story, but a difficult chapter in a larger narrative of healing and purpose. Tyler appeared at her side, studying the designs with unexpected recognition. Dad told me about this. He said people who get lost inside themselves need special maps to find their way home. The simple observation carried the weight of understanding beyond the boy's years. Laura wondered how many other insights Robert had shared during their video calls that she had dismissed as inadequate substitutes for physical presence. It won't be easy to continue what he started, Frank cautioned, watching their reactions. The location is challenging, funding would be significant, and you'd need professional partnerships to create a legitimate therapeutic program. Laura thought about their situation. Homeless in practical terms, her career interrupted savings that would sustain them only briefly. The practical obstacles were formidable, yet the alternative, walking away from Robert's final vision, felt increasingly impossible. Sometimes the hardest path is the only one worth taking, she said, echoing words Robert had once lived by. 3 days later, they returned to the cabin via helicopter arranged by the federal investigation team. The dramatic aerial approach revealed the property in its full context, a tiny human outpost perched amid vast wilderness, seemingly precarious, yet perfectly integrated with the mountainside that supported it. The cabin had been secured and partially restored after Coleman's men had ransacked it. Laura and Tyler moved through this space with new awareness, seeing beyond the simple shelter to the vision it represented. Every design choice reflected deliberate intention. The southern exposure maximizing natural light during winter months, the rainwater collection system minimizing environmental impact, the windows positioned to frame specific views that invited contemplation. Tyler immediately claimed the small loft bedroom as his own, arranging his few possessions with care. Laura took the main bedroom, where she found Robert's collection of books on trauma recovery, sustainable living, and ecological design, organized with military precision on shelves he had built himself. As evening approached, they sat together on the cabin's porch, watching the setting sun transform the valley below into a canvas of lengthening shadows and golden light. The beauty was breathtaking, the silence profound. Laura understood why Robert had found healing here. The mountains demanded presence in a way that left little room for the intrusive memories and hypervigilance that characterize PTSD. "Do you think we can really do it, Mom? Build Dad's healing place?" Tyler asked, his eyes fixed on the distant peaks. The practical challenges remained daunting, but something in the mountain air made them seem less insurmountable. "I don't know if we can do it exactly as he planned, but we can try. We can start small and build over time." Tyler nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. Dad said big dreams grow from small seeds, like his garden. The following morning, Laura examined the garden more carefully. What had initially appeared to be a simple collection of vegetables and herbs revealed itself as a sophisticated therapeutic landscape. Robert had interplanted traditional food crops with specific herbs known for their calming properties, creating concentric rings that serve both practical and healing purposes. Tyler appeared with Robert's gardening journal, pointing to detailed diagrams. The outer ring keeps pests away naturally. The middle plants support each other's growth. The center plants are special. They help with anxiety and sleep. Laura watched her son tend the plants with surprising skill, explaining each one's purpose with the confident knowledge of someone who had absorbed these lessons deeply. Another connection revealed, Robert teaching Tyler gardening, remotely maintaining a bond through shared cultivation that Laura had never fully recognized. Their quiet work was interrupted by the arrival of a helicopter, not the official government aircraft they had arrived in, but a smaller private model. Frank emerged accompanied by a professionally dressed woman Laura didn't recognize. "This is Elaine Hodges from the Wildfire Survivors Foundation," Frank explained after introductions. "I thought you might want to meet her given what you're considering." Elaine surveyed the cabin and its surroundings with an appraising eye. "Frank has shared Robert's vision with me. It aligns remarkably well with initiatives our foundation has been developing." Over coffee on the porch, Elaine explained the growing recognition within first responder communities of nature-based therapies for PTSD. Traditional clinical approaches were being supplemented with wilderness experiences, therapeutic gardening, and retreat programs that remove participants from triggering environments. What Robert designed here intuitively is what our clinical advisors have been advocating for years, she noted, reviewing the architectural plans. Remote enough to create psychological distance from everyday stressors, but purposefully designed for community healing rather than isolation. Laura described their nascent idea of completing Robert's vision. The practical challenges remain significant: funding, accessibility, staffing, program development. Elaine's expression grew thoughtful. "Our foundation has been looking for a physical location for our immersive recovery program. Most available properties are either too developed, destroying the wilderness component, or too remote to be practical." She gestured toward the surrounding landscape. "This strikes an ideal balance, and the story behind it, a firefighter creating his own healing space, provides a powerful narrative for participants." The conversation shifted to possibilities, a partnership between the Mitchell family and the Wildfire Survivors Foundation, combining Robert's property and vision with the foundation's resources and clinical expertise. The cabin would serve as the centerpiece of a small-scale retreat facility with additional therapeutic spaces added gradually over time. "We wouldn't want to overwhelm the landscape or destroy what makes this place special," Elaine emphasized. "The goal would be minimal development, maximum integration with the natural environment, exactly what Robert seems to have intended." As summer progressed into early fall, the transformation of Robert's solitary refuge into something larger took its first concrete steps. With foundation funding, a small construction team arrived to begin work on the initial expansions, 2 additional cabin structures designed for program participants, modest in size but carefully positioned to maximize views and privacy. Tyler supervised the location of each building with surprising authority, for an 8-year-old, insisting that the placement honor his father's original vision. The construction team comprised primarily of veterans who understood the therapeutic purpose of the project, treated his input with genuine respect. "The boy has his father's eye," the foreman commented to Laura after Tyler had suggested a slight adjustment to preserve a particular sightline to the mountains. "Sees things most adults miss." Laura had enrolled Tyler in an online schooling program that allowed him to remain on the mountain during this critical development phase. His education now included practical lessons in construction ecology and project management that no traditional classroom could have provided. The withdrawn child who had struggled to engage with school in Portland was thriving in this unconventional learning environment. As construction progressed, Laura found herself drawn to Robert's research on nature-based recovery therapies. His journals contained not just personal observations, but scholarly notes on emerging studies, practical applications, and case histories he had collected from fellow firefighters. "Your husband was conducting serious research here," Elaine noted, reviewing the materials Laura had organized. "This isn't just anecdotal. He was systematically documenting outcomes and refining approaches." The Foundation's clinical team began incorporating Robert's findings into their program development, validating his intuitive methods with their professional expertise. What emerged was a therapeutic model that bridged traditional clinical approaches with wilderness immersion and peer support. Laura found herself increasingly involved in this aspect of the project, drawing on her background in education to help structure the program's learning components. The skills that had made her an effective history teacher, organizing information, creating accessible narratives, adapting content to different learning styles, proved surprisingly transferable to curriculum development for trauma recovery. You have a gift for translating complex concepts into understandable frameworks, the clinical director observed after reviewing Laura's draft of a participant handbook. Have you considered formal training in trauma-informed education? We could sponsor certification courses. The suggestion opened a new possibility, not just preserving Robert's legacy, but evolving alongside it, developing her own expertise in a field she had never previously considered. The path forward wasn't just about honoring the past, but creating a future that built upon it. As autumn painted the mountainsides in brilliant colors, the first phase of construction neared completion. The expanded property now included the original cabin, two participant cabins, a small welcome center that doubled as a group meeting space, and the meditation pavilion Tyler had helped design. A small dedication ceremony was planned for late October, marking the official establishment of the Phoenix Mountain Retreat Center for First Responder Recovery. The name suggested by Tyler honored both his father's original Project Phoenix concept and the transformative purpose of the facility. The evening before the ceremony, Laura and Tyler sat on the main cabin's porch watching the sunset paint the cliffs in fading golden light. The air carried the crisp scent of autumn, a reminder that winter would soon bring new challenges to their mountain home. "Do you think Dad would be proud?" Tyler asked, his voice carrying the vulnerability of a child beneath the maturity he had demonstrated throughout the project. Laura considered the question carefully. "I think he would be amazed. What we've created here is bigger than what he imagined, but it grows from the seeds he planted." She placed an arm around her son's shoulders. "And he would be incredibly proud of you, Ty. The way you've carried his vision forward, understood what he was trying to build." Tyler leaned against her momentarily, just a small boy seeking reassurance rather than the surprisingly capable project contributor he had become. "I miss him more here sometimes, even though I feel closer to him too." Not strange at all. I feel the same way. The mountain retreat held Robert's presence more tangibly than anywhere else, making both his life and his absence more keenly felt. Missing someone deeply is just another way of loving them. The dedication ceremony brought together an unexpectedly diverse group foundation: representatives, mental health professionals, Forest Service personnel who had supported the project, and most significantly, a small contingent of firefighters from Robert's former department. Many had not known about his mountain refuge or his struggle with PTSD until after his death. Captain James Reeves, Robert's former commanding officer, spoke with evident emotion about the significance of the center. "Robert Mitchell was one of the finest firefighters I ever served with. His courage wasn't just in running into burning buildings, but in confronting the internal fires that haunt so many of us in this profession. What he's created here, what his family has brought to fruition, will save lives as surely as any rescue operation." The firefighters presented Laura and Tyler with a memorial plaque to be installed at the center's entrance. Phoenix Mountain Retreat, founded on the vision of Robert Mitchell, who found healing in these mountains and created a path for others to follow. As winter approached, the retreat center prepared for its first participants, a small pilot group of 4 firefighters from different departments across the western states, each struggling with PTSD symptoms that had not responded adequately to traditional treatments. Tyler insisted on being part of the welcome process, personally showing each participant to their cabin and explaining the property's features. His natural ability to connect, explaining his father's garden design, pointing out wildlife viewing spots, sharing stories of their own journey, created an immediate atmosphere of authenticity that no professional orientation could have matched. "The kid's a natural therapist," one of the foundation staff observed after watching Tyler guide a particularly withdrawn participant through the meditation trail. "He meets people exactly where they are without any agenda or expectation." As the pilot program unfolded, Laura found herself settling into a new role that drew on her teaching background, while opening unexpected avenues of growth. She developed educational materials, facilitated discussion groups, and helped participants connect their wilderness experiences to broader concepts of recovery and resilience. Winter transformed the mountainscape into a pristine white expanse that redefined the retreat experience. The silence of snow-covered forests, the heightened awareness required for cold weather activities, the primal satisfaction of maintaining warmth in a challenging environment, all became therapeutic elements in their own right. The spring thaw brought formal evaluation of the pilot program with results that exceeded expectations. Clinical outcomes showed significant improvement in PTSD symptoms among participants. Testimonials spoke of transformative experiences that conventional treatments had failed to provide. Cost analyses demonstrated that despite the remote location, the program's effectiveness justified the operational expenses. What began as one man's personal healing journey could revolutionize how we approach first responder trauma, the Foundation chairman announced during their review meeting. The Phoenix Mountain model deserves to be studied, refined, and potentially replicated. The validation of Robert's vision expanded and enhanced through collaborative effort, but fundamentally rooted in his original insight brought a profound sense of completion to the journey that had begun with his death. The cabin he had built as a solitary refuge had become the heart of a community dedicated to healing. The research he had conducted alone in the wilderness was now being formalized into clinical protocols that could help thousands. As a second summer approached, Laura and Tyler stood together on the cabin's porch watching as the last snow retreated from south-facing slopes, revealing the first tentative green of new growth. The cycle of seasons mirrored their own journey from the winter of grief through the difficult thaw of understanding to this new season of purpose and growth. "I think I understand now why Dad needed to be here," Tyler said, his gaze fixed on the distant peaks still crowned with snow. "Some healing can only happen in wild places." Laura considered her son's observation, recognizing the wisdom in it. The mountains had offered Robert what he couldn't find in civilization space: to confront his demons without endangering others, connection to natural rhythms that put human suffering in perspective, physical challenges that anchored him in present reality rather than traumatic memory. "Your dad found something important here," she agreed, "something he needed desperately, but I think he always intended to bring it back to us once he understood it well enough to share." Tyler nodded, a small smile softening his serious expression. "He did bring it back, through all of this." He gestured toward the expanded center, the new cabins nestled among the trees, the meditation pavilion catching morning light, the communal spaces where wounded healers gathered to find their way forward. "Dad built something bigger than a house. He built a way home for people who get lost inside themselves." This simple, profound observation captured the essence of everything they had created together. Not just physical structures on a mountainside, but pathways back to wholeness for those whose service to others had left them broken. A helicopter appeared in the distance, bringing the next group of participants to begin their healing journey. Tyler straightened, ready to welcome them, as he had so many others to share his father's mountain and the wisdom it had nurtured. Laura watched her son move toward the landing pad with confident purpose, no longer the silent, grieving child of a year ago, but a young person who had found his own meaningful role in a community of healing. Robert's legacy lived not just in the center they had created, but in Tyler himself and his compassion for others suffering, his practical knowledge of the natural world, his quiet strength in the face of adversity. The greatest gift Robert had left them wasn't the mountain property or even the vision for the healing center. It was the understanding that broken places can become sources of light, that what seems like an ending can transform into a beginning, that love expresses itself in unexpected ways when direct paths are blocked. As the helicopter settled onto the pad, bringing new seekers to this high place of healing, Laura felt Robert's presence not as a ghost haunting their lives, but as a foundation supporting their future, solid, enduring, integrated into everything they had built together on this mountain he had loved.